Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Finance This, Property That. It is designed to educate and empower financial legacies for generations. We provide you with education from both my experience in the field of finance and property, and we bring in guest speakers who are experts in their sector of the finance and property fields. Welcome everyone. Welcome back, Natalie, from JHK Legal for part 2. You were my first ever guest on this podcast. The podcast is still up, by the way. You can see the journey, but big changes in where we're meeting today. How you going?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for coming back. It's a bit of an upgrade, right? We don't have to hide little wires anymore, which is great. Thanks, Chris, for allowing us to use your equipment last time. But yeah, now we don't have to get him to haul that in every day. But look, thanks for joining me again. It's been roughly about 6 months or so since that first one was, probably about 3 or 4 months since that first one was released, and thought I'd get you back. A lot's changed. We've obviously been working together quite closely. Mm-hmm. You've seen a few things that have been happening recently, and as I have, and I just thought I'd get you on and have a chat. So, what's been happening with yourself in the last since we last spoke?
Yeah, we've been busy as usual. Yeah, the market's going well. Lots of sales, lots of purchases, lots of transactions.
Yep. Last time I think you said you had some knees. How are your knees going? They're all right. No more damage to your knees.
No more knees.
Oh, good. That means you mustn't be spending too much money on shoes. All good. No, look, I really want to get you on here just to talk about some tips that you've seen. We've sent you obviously a few clients, and I'm being a big advocate of before, not during. Find your solicitor or find your conveyancer solicitor before you start. Like that was the main theme of our last one. But
definitely,
I just want you to reflect back on your. I want some tips to give clients of what are your top tips when it comes to purchasing a property, commercial or refinancing, or just going through your line of work.
So one of the top tips I would say, just as you raised before, is you need to get in early. So find your key people that you'll be using for the transaction, your mortgage broker, your solicitor. In terms of contacting your solicitor, you'll want to get in very early when you start looking to purchase. You can have that early discussion about what your offer might look like. So we can guide you with what special conditions you might want to put forward, what your settlement timeframes might be. You might have a complicated situation. You might need a purchasing entity set up. You might need some structuring advice. So yeah, especially having the right purchasing entity is very important when buying property. So if you get in early and get that key advice, that will make the transaction smooth. Yeah,
I will 100% back that. The reason being is a lot of my clients at the moment are putting down contracts with their name and then having a special clause in there to change when they get the entity. And my question is...
That's a big no-no.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
That's a duty implication there. So there was
tell me.
There was a relevant, there was a recent ruling.
Yeah.
Basically, if you put down, or in Queensland, let's talk about Queensland specific, you put your personal name down to purchase, you're actually purchasing through a company, but you haven't yet established that entity. If you have a special condition which it is allowing the buyer to rescind the contract and enter into a new contract with that new entity once it's created. The Office of State Revenue have actually considered that to be a satisfaction of a condition, which means you're satisfying the contract, which means there's a duty implication. So duty arises on the agreement to purchase property. So usually due within 30 days of the contract date or 30 days from satisfaction of conditions. But yeah, that's a big no-no these days. It's a very recent ruling where basically the Office of State Revenue have said, don't put that nominee replacement purchaser kind of condition in your contract because you could incur double
you
duty.
You can see on my face right now, because I've literally had about 3 or 4 of these contracts that they didn't have it set up. I've always said, set your entities up, go speak to your accountant.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Right. So when you use the word duty, right, automatically I'm thinking stamp duty.
Correct.
Is that what it actually is?
Exactly.
So it is stamp duty, not nothing.
I mean, well, these days it's called transfer duty. It's formerly known as stamp duty, but the term's interchangeable.
Okay. Yeah. So for the layperson, duty means stamp duty.
That's
okay.
it.
So what do you mean does it mean they've sold that to the?
Well, essentially, duty arises on the agreement to transfer dutiable property.
Yeah.
So, essentially, the contract hasn't been rescinded or cancelled, notwithstanding that's what the special condition says.
Yeah.
The State Revenue Office deem that condition has been satisfied, which means that duty arises on that contract. So even if you go ahead and you say, okay, I've set up my entity now, I'm rescinding this contract, duty's still applicable on that contract, and then the second contract that you enter into with the new purchasing entity. So you're paying double duty. Mm-hmm.
Oh, right.
And not many people know about this. No. It's an issue, I suppose, if you get audited, your file gets audited. If it doesn't and your conveyancer didn't know, they wouldn't process duty on the transaction. But, it's a risk for a lot of people. If ever the Office of State Revenue come along and they audit these files, they will consider that duty attached to that initial contract, even though it was later rescinded.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if anyone takes any tips out of this podcast today, get your stuff sorted. That just reinforces everything that we've just talked about. Yeah. Right, even the first one. Wow. Okay, well, that's a really big thing. Yeah. What other things are you seeing? What about you build and pest and stuff like that? What do you?
I mean, most sellers these days are still accepting building and pest clauses, so that's generally fine. We always like to see a due diligence condition, which we've spoken about before, which is really a catch-all clause for buyers. The big issue in Queensland is, has your building been approved by the council? Do you have the relevant development and building approvals in place? And then has that work been certified? So,
is that for mainly the renovated properties or properties?
It could be, someone could have done an extension of a property. There have been situations where it could be an owner builder, for example, and they've just gone ahead and they've built their house, and there's just no permits, there's no approvals whatsoever, there's no certifications. Oof. So, there's risks with, I guess, any property you're purchasing. But
okay, and that's a clause that you would just put in to the contract, and how would one word that clause just in a high level?
So basically it's the buyer can make inquiries and searches in relation to the property. If they're not satisfied with those inquiries and the results of those searches, they have a termination right. They can get out of the contract.
Right. So it's just another way to potentially, if there is something wrong with it that you find down the track, outside of the finance, outside of the build and pest.
That's it.
To make sure that you are getting the property that you think you're getting.
Exactly. Because if you didn't have a due diligence condition, you were trying to rely on your building and pest condition, that condition wouldn't allow you to get out of the contract. The only way that you can terminate the contract under building and pest is if you're not satisfied with that report. That report won't tell you if there's council approval in place. It will tell you if there's a leaking sink or, for example.
Okay. So that's where someone like yourself or your team do the searches in the background as part of the due diligence. That's why you pay for someone to do all that for you, right?
Definitely.
Okay, cool. Well, what else? What other top tips have you got for us?
I recently had a buyer. They were purchasing a property with their partner. Their partner was on a temporary visa in the process of applying for a permanent visa. The contract was in both names. This person didn't come and get advice before they signed the contract.
I think I know where this is going. Yeah.
Again, this is a duty issue. So this transaction would have attracted additional foreigner acquirer duty had we kept the spouse on the contract. We managed to rescind that contract and have a new contract entered into with the correct purchaser. And that way that buyer could benefit from the first home buyer concession, and there was no duty payable whatsoever.
Because you didn't have the special clause to change it.
No, we didn't have that special clause in there, thank goodness. But it was just a negotiation with the seller.
Yeah, so, I've actually seen that happen on too many occasions, and that's also I think that would be from the financial, it was from your broker or your. This is a client that came to us, same problem, but then didn't listen to our advice. Said, go speak to your solicitor. Can we get this changed? Because I think they were up for about 50,000. It's pretty much double, wasn't it? It's quite a bit. It's
a lot. It's very high.
I think 8%, 7 to 8% or something on
7%.
top. Yeah, it's a lot.
It is, and that's on the purchase price. So it's very high duty to pay. And another thing with that particular contract, there was a tenant in the property. There was a signed lease. That lease didn't terminate or end 6 months within the settlement date. So this is a requirement if you want to benefit from the home concession or the first home buyer's concession, because you have an obligation to move into the property within 6 months of settlement, regardless if there's a tenancy agreement in place. So this particular client, we needed to go that extra step and negotiate with that tenant to have that tenancy end early. Otherwise, they would have been up for investor duty. Basically, they wouldn't qualify for that, home concession or first home buyer concession.
And that's huge, right? Because first, depending on the property, was it a brand new property?
No, it was established property. So that duty was nil.
Yes,
but it could have been 20,000.
Yeah, because it would have been under 500. The purchase under 500. Yeah. Wow. Okay, that just further reinforces the value of getting the right advice, and taking that extra bit of care to ensure that we're empowering financial legacies for generations here, and to get it wrong at the beginning would have been that's changed someone's life.
Absolutely,
and that's put money back in their pocket.
That's it. Well, they might not have been able to get finance to pay for all those additional duty, that they weren't expecting when they signed this contract.
Funds to complete wouldn't have been there, and you wouldn't have been able to do it. They have to terminate the contract and then start again.
That's it.
Oh, mate, that's a really great outcome. And how did your team celebrate? Like that's a big thing, right? Like a little bit of a win for a
definitely.
Client. What did you guys do? Did you call it out?
Just a cheers. Like, when that property settled, we obviously called the client and gave her the good news, and she was really thankful to our team.
I hope they left you guys a good Google review. So that's one of your more recent ones. Have you had any other sort of, different types of scenarios that have come up recently where you've had to really go out of the box, really use your team skill, knowledge and expertise to have a favourable outcome for the client?
We always have those issues with self-managed super fund purchases.
Okay, do tell.
So when you're buying through a self-managed super fund and you are borrowing funds to complete the purchase, basically you need to comply with the Act in terms of the limited recourse borrowing arrangement. That means you need to have a separate entity established, which we call a bear trust.
Yep.
And this is the entity that will sign the contract and be the purchaser. And this is for Queensland specific. Each jurisdiction is slightly different, but has that requirement to have that bear trust established. But we've seen plenty of times where people will sign contracts without that advice, just in the name of the self-managed super fund, which is a big issue.
Yeah, because the self-managed super fund doesn't actually hold the property.
No, that's correct. So they have the beneficial interest in the property. They can hold title to the property if there's no loan.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And the reason for that is so that the lender's only recourse is against the property, and basically the property is separated from your other self-managed super fund assets, so that, you know, there's no recourse. They can't touch, you know, your savings or your shares or whatever other investments you have through your self-managed super fund. Those assets are protected.
Yeah. Like it's literally an asset protection strategy brought out by the government to ensure that, like you don't lose your nest egg. How many of those self-managed super fund transactions are you seeing?
Quite a few. Not as many, as the last few years, but they're still happening, especially for investment type properties and, that lower to mid range, where they've got that good cash flow with the rent and things like that. It is
important, because you can't be negatively geared. You've got to make it positively geared. It's not one of those strategies. It is. I am seeing a few come across my desk with the idea, and I'm saying the same thing. You need to have everything sorted, including, especially because there's a few that are just being set up newly. And I've just said, hang on a sec, you're not close to buying a property. You don't even have the funds in the account yet. The transfer over of the funds from your retail super fund to here, that can take some time. Yeah, depending on who it is. But then I said, well, have you got the bear trust set up? And they're not even at that stage. It just doesn't take long.
No. So we can set up a bear trust basically same day.
Yeah.
So we would set up a corporate entity to act as trustee of the bear trust, and then we'll establish the trust and basically same day.
Yeah, and without knowing what money we're working with, it's kind of hard. We can give you guesses, but it's just this whole thing just reinforces about having yourself organised and speaking to the right people before you start transacting on property or making property. You could be up for double duty.
That's it.
You could be up for a lot of pain if you don't set it up correctly.
That's it.
And get the right advice, right? Yeah.
Definitely.
Cool. I think that's we're seeing a lot, especially in the commercial. Do you doing a lot of commercial self-managed?
We do plenty of commercial.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you find that a little bit easier than the residential?
A little bit.
Yeah.
People do seem to be a little bit more organised and have sought out their broker and their accountant and get in early to get that advice piece around the structuring. So
yeah, I think the advice piece is really key, right?
Definitely.
I'm seeing a couple of clients that I've speaking to in very early stages around the self-managed super fund commercial, straying a little bit away from the resi. Some are doing a bit of resi, but the commercial stacks a little bit more than the resi at the moment. But look, again, get the advice.
Definitely. I had a client buying a commercial property with the intention of they would lease through their business. So we gave them some advice around GST exemption and going concern requirements and things like that, and also assisted them with setting up the lease arrangement to ensure that when they signed that contract, the lease was in place. There's a going concern exemption.
Yeah, I had a bit of a contentious one about that, the going concern. And then we found out that the seller wasn't registered for GST. Okay. So high five. But again, that was, we had to really dig deep and understand that, because the finance hinged on that. Because do we borrow extra for the GST?
That's it.
We didn't end up doing that. So the clients actually now have got cash left over to upgrade the commercial property. So again, getting the right advice, understanding it, speaking to the right people, and doing the extra searches, which is all key, right?
That's it. Imagine signing a contract, not having that advice, and then you've got to pay an extra $200,000 for GST.
Yeah.
And you just weren't expecting that. So
100%. Anything else you want to add, or?
I think we've covered. Points? Yeah, I think we've covered quite a few. The only other thing I can think of really is just with special conditions. What I'm seeing a lot lately is agents are preparing contracts for clients and putting in their standard special conditions, but those special conditions haven't been reviewed by a solicitor and often don't have any recourse. So it might say the seller is obligated to carry out some building work on the property, and that is the extent of the special condition. So we're not seeing what happens if the seller doesn't comply. So
or specifically, what are you actually repairing?
Exactly. That's it. Sometimes they're very vague.
Yeah.
And it just leaves leaves it open to dispute and issues when it comes to settlement time. And
you're exposed, right?
That's it.
So, okay, all right, you get that contract over your desk, right? How do you go about making it more in favour of your client, the seller, right?
Yeah. So, let's say we're acting for the buyer and the buyer is expecting the seller to do some works. I mean, if we get a contract, it's already been signed, they don't have advice, we would be trying to negotiate a variation to the contract after it's been signed. And I guess get something in writing from both parties' solicitors to confirm what is the actual agreement, what is the scope of works, what will happen if the seller doesn't comply, do they need to provide warranties and invoices and evidence, etc. But it is very hard. Once you've signed a contract, those are the terms that you've agreed to purchase something. So it's hard to then negotiate something other than what you've signed.
All right. So again, back to our first point. Before you start looking,
that's it.
Get your entities together.
That's right.
Understand what you're actually signing. Get your solicitor to review actually what you're signing, especially this, like you said, the special conditions, the structure of the actual purchase. Again, back to the clients that was on the visa, potentially an extra 7% on top of that. You know, you haven't structured it correctly. You've put your own name down, but you're really purchasing in a trust. There's the double duty implication. Having all that lined up, ready to go before you execute that contract. Key, right?
Definitely. Just makes that process seamless. I mean, there might always be hiccups along the way, but if you engage the right person, you know, we can make the process as smooth as possible.
Yep. Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for coming back onto the podcast. Must have done right the first time. Cool. So if anyone that's listening or watching wants to get a hold of you,
so you can email me, natalie.smythe@jhklegal.com.au. You can go to our webpage, our contact number, 337. Oh my God, what number is?
It's a 4500. 4500.
379 4500.
Well, it's on the website, jhklegal.com.au. Cool. Are you guys live on? You guys are also on Instagram, right? You've got
Instagram
at JHK Legal.
JHK Legal.
Yep. Cool. Don't worry. This can all be edited. It's all good. It's all good.
It's a phone. Me not knowing my own phone number.
No, that's actually probably going to end up on a reel. Oh, it's a good gag. It's all good. All right. Fantastic. Guys, again, just want to ensure that all the information here is very general in nature. It doesn't take into consideration any of your personal circumstances. And I would encourage you to get advice from an expert in the field, like Natalie, or myself for finance. Again, I don't pay for advertising. I don't have advertising on here. The only thing I would highly recommend that you do is, if you found something that you've learned in this podcast, share it with your network. It doesn't take a lot to follow JHK Legal on the Instagram page. It doesn't take a lot to follow the Finance This, Property That podcast on Instagram, and also Dion Finance Specialist, or at Dion Finance Specialist on Instagram. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. And again, if you've learned something, pass it on, because that is the whole idea of this podcast. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to lunch.
Yeah, me too.
Good.
Let's do it.
I'm pretty hungry. Thank you again for coming on, and we'll have you back on again. Hopefully another 6 months' time with some more stories on how we've helped more clients.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks.